The Winchester rifle clicked against the wooden beam as Cade Maverick froze in the doorway of his stable, his finger hovering over the trigger. There, curled beneath his prize stallion Thunderstall, lay a woman with skin like burnished copper, and hair black as midnight, her breathing shallow and labored. Blood seeped through the torn deerskin of her dress, painting dark stains across the hay. "Well, I'll be damned," he muttered, lowering his weapon but keeping it ready. The woman's eyes snapped open, fierce, wild, and the color of autumn leaves. She scrambled backward like a cornered wildcat, her hand instinctively reaching for a bone-handled knife at her thigh. "Easy there, wildcat," Cade said, raising his free hand. "You're bleedin' all over my clean hay." She spoke in rapid Apache, her voice hoarse but defiant. Though he couldn't understand the words, the meaning was clear: stay back or face the consequences. Her knife gleamed in the lantern light, steady despite her obvious weakness. Cade set his rifle against the wall and crouched down, making himself less threatening. "Name's Cade Maverick. This is my ranch, and you're hurt bad. Let me help." The woman, no more than 22, he guessed, studied him with calculating eyes. She'd obviously been running hard. Her moccasins were torn, her dress shredded by thorns and branches. Whatever had driven her to seek shelter in his stable, it wasn't good. "Ayanna," she whispered finally, the word barely audible. "Ayanna," he repeated, testing the name on his tongue. "Pretty name for a pretty woman who's about to bleed to death in my stable." Her eyes flashed with anger, but she swayed where she sat. The knife clattered to the floor as her strength gave out. Without hesitation, Cade lunged forward, catching her before she collapsed completely. She was lighter than he'd expected, all lean muscle and graceful bones. Up close, he could see the extent of her injuries: a deep gash along her ribs, scratches covering her arms, and what looked like rope burns around her wrists. Someone had hurt her, and hurt her bad. Thunders. "Gonna have to share his quarters tonight," Cade murmured, lifting Ayanna in his arms. The stallion nickered softly, as if understanding the gravity of the situation. As he carried her toward his farmhouse, Ayanna stirred against his chest. Her eyes opened again, locking with his. For a moment, something passed between them: recognition. Perhaps her destiny calling. Then her lids fluttered closed, and she went limp in his arms. The autumn wind howled across the plains as Cade kicked open his front door, his unexpected guest cradled against him. He had no idea that the half-dead Apache woman would turn his orderly life upside down, challenge everything he believed about love and loyalty, and ultimately become the missing piece of his soul he never knew he was searching for. But fate, it seemed, had other plans for the lonesome cowboy and the wild woman who'd stumbled into his world. Dawn was breaking over the Texas plains when Ayanna's fever finally broke. Cade had spent the entire night alternating between cleaning her wounds and forcing willow bark tea between her lips, his calloused hands surprisingly gentle as they tended to her injuries. She awakened to find herself in a real bed for the first time in months, wearing one of his clean shirts that hung loose on her slender frame. "About time you decided to rejoin the living," Cade said from his position in a wooden chair beside the bed. Dark circles shadowed his steel-gray eyes, evidence of his sleepless vigil. "Was starting to think I'd be digging a grave instead of cooking breakfast." Ayanna tried to sit up, wincing as her ribs protested. "Why?" she asked in halting English, her accent thick but understandable. "Why help?" Cade shrugged, though his expression was serious. "Couldn't very well let you die in my stable. Bad for Thunder's appetite." He stood, moving to pour water from a pitcher into a basin. "Besides, figured you had a story worth hearing." She watched him warily as he approached, with a damp cloth. "I tell no stories to white men." "Fair enough." He paused, the cloth halfway to her forehead. But seeing as how you're wearing my shirt and sleeping in my bed, maybe we can make an exception." Something in his tone, not demanding, just patient, made her relax slightly. Most white men would have already turned her over to the authorities or worse. This one had risked his own safety to tend her wounds. "Apache don't trust easily," she said finally. "Neither do cowboys," he replied, gently dabbing at a cut on her temple. "Guess that makes us even." Their eyes met, and Ayanna felt something shift inside her chest, a warmth that had nothing to do with fever. His touch was careful, respectful, nothing like the brutal hands that had bound her wrists and dragged her from her people's camp 3 days ago. "Bad men," she whispered, the memory making her tremble. "Take me. Say I belong to them now." Cade's jaw tightened, his hand stilling on her face. "What kind of men?" "Traders. They come to trade with my uncle's tribe, see me gathering herbs. Decide. I worth more than furs and beads." The cloth in Cade's hand began to shake as rage built in his chest. He'd heard stories white men who thought they could take whatever they wanted from the tribes, including their women. It made his blood boil. "How'd you get away?" A ghost of a smile crossed Ayanna's lips. "Apache women not so easy to keep. I watch. When they drink firewater and sleep, I take their knife and cut ropes. But they wake. They follow with dogs. That's why you were running so hard." Cade set the cloth aside and moved to the window, scanning the horizon for any sign of pursuit. "They still looking for you?" "Always looking. White traders not like to lose their prizes." Cade turned back to her, his expression grim. "Well, they ain't finding you here. This is my land, and I protect what's mine." The words hung in the air. Between them, loaded with meaning neither was quite ready to acknowledge. Ayanna studied his face, the strong jaw, the honest eyes, the determined set of his mouth. She'd never met a white man who spoke of protection without demanding something in return. "Why you care?" she asked softly. Cade was quiet for a long moment, then sat back down in his chair. "Maybe 'cause I know what it's like to run from something that wants to own you." 3 days later, Ayanna was strong enough to walk to the stable, though Cade hovered nearby like a mother hen. She'd insisted on checking Thunder, claiming all horses could sense danger, and the stallion would tell her if the traders were close. What she hadn't expected was the immediate bond that formed between her and the magnificent black horse. "Well, I'll be," Cade murmured, watching in amazement as Thunder nuzzled Ayanna's palm, completely docile under her touch. He nearly took my arm off last week when I tried to clean his hooves. "Acts like he's known you all his life." "Animals recognize kindred spirits," Ayanna said, running her fingers through Thunder's mane. The horse whinnied softly, pressing his great head against her shoulder. "He knows I understand running." Cade leaned against the stall door, studying her profile in the golden afternoon light. She was healing quickly Apache resilience, she'd explained, but there was still something fragile about her, like a wild bird that might take flight at any moment. He found himself watching for her smiles, treasuring each one like a prospector hoarding gold. "You could stay, you know," he said suddenly, the words tumbling out before he could stop them. "I mean, until you're fully healed, or longer, if you wanted." Ayanna's hand stilled in Thunder's mane. "White cowboy and Apache woman. People in your village would not understand." "Don't give a damn what they understand," Cade said fiercely. "This is my land, my life. I'll live it how I see fit." She turned to face him fully, searching his face. "You barely know me, know enough." He stepped closer, his voice dropping to a husky whisper. "Know you're brave enough to fight 3 armed men with nothing but a stolen knife. Know you're gentle enough to calm a wild stallion with just your touch. Know you make my coffee taste better just by sitting at my table drinking it." Heat bloomed in Ayanna's cheeks. No man had ever spoken to her like this, not with pretty words, but with raw honesty that made her heart race. "My people, your people ain't here," Kate interrupted, reaching out to tuck a strand of dark hair behind her ear. "And mine don't matter. Question is, what do you want, Ayanna?" The sound of her name on his lips sent shivers down her spine. She wanted to lean into his touch, to let herself believe that a life with this gentle cowboy was possible. But reality was a harsh mistress. "I want many things I cannot have," she admitted. "Try me." Their faces were inches apart now, the air between them crackling with tension. Ayanna could smell leather and wood smoke on his skin, could see the flecks of green in his gray eyes. Her hand came up almost of its own accord, tracing the strong line of his jaw. "I want to forget the hands that hurt me," she whispered. "I want to remember what it feels like to be touched with kindness. I want—" Thunder's sharp whinny cut through her words like a blade. The stallion's ears were pricked forward, his nostrils flaring as he scented something on the wind that made his eyes roll white with fear. "Riders," Ayanna breathed, her face going pale. "They've found me." Cade was already moving, his hand closing around the rifle he kept mounted near the stable entrance. "How many?" She closed her eyes, listening to sounds only Apache ears could distinguish. "4, maybe 5. They have dogs." "Get to the house," Cade ordered, his voice hard as granite. "There's a root cellar behind the kitchen. Hide there and don't come out until I call for you. I won't hide while you fight my battles. Ain't your battle anymore, wildcat." He turned to her, his eyes blazing with protective fury. "It's mine now." The sound of hoofbeats was growing closer, accompanied by the distant baying of tracking hounds. The first shot shattered the afternoon stillness as Cade crouched behind his fence post, rifle trained on the approaching riders. True to Ayanna's count, 5 men thundered toward his property, their faces hard and determined. The largest one, a bear of a man with greasy hair and cruel eyes, raised his hand to halt. The group just outside Cade's property line. "Maverick," the man bellowed. "Name's Butch Crawley. We're tracking stolen property, and our dogs say it's on your land." "Only thing on my land that don't belong is you," Cade called back, not lowering his rifle. "Turn around and ride out." Crawley spat in the dirt and nudged his horse forward. "Now that ain't neighborly. See, we had ourselves a little Apache filly, and she up and ran off. Cost us good money, she did. Figure whoever's hiding her owes us compensation." "Don't know nothin' about any Apache woman," Cade lied smoothly. "But I know plenty about trespassers. You got 10 seconds to get before I start shooting." Behind him, he heard the soft whisper of moccasins on grass. He didn't need to turn to know Ayanna had ignored his order to hide. "Damn stubborn woman." "I hear you, Cade," she murmured, so low only he could catch the words. "If shooting starts, I take Thunder and run. Lead them away from you." "Like hell you will," he growled under his breath. Crawley was studying the ranch buildings with calculating eyes. "Tell you what, cowboy, hand over our property peaceful-like, and we'll forget about the trouble she's caused. Hell, we might even cut you in for a share when we sell her down in Mexico." The casual way he spoke of selling a human being like livestock made Cade's trigger finger itch. "Last warning, Crawley. Ride out." "Boys," Crawley said to his companions, "looks like we got ourselves a stubborn one. Reckon we'll have to search the place proper-like?" The 5 men spurred their horses forward, spreading out to surround the ranch. Cade's first shot took the hat clean off the nearest rider's head, sending him tumbling from his saddle in panic. The second shot spooked Crawley's horse, making it rear and prance sideways. "Son of a bitch can shoot," one of the traders yelled, diving for cover behind Cade's water trough. "So can I," came Ayanna's voice, steady and cold as winter wind. Cade risked a glance back and nearly choked on his own breath. She stood in the stable doorway, bow drawn and arrow nocked, looking every inch the Apache warrior her people had raised her to be. The morning sun caught her hair like black fire, and her eyes held the focused intensity of a hunting hawk. Her arrow took the man behind the water trough through the shoulder, spinning him around with a howl of pain. The other three traders suddenly found themselves caught in a crossfire between Cade's rifle and Ayana's bow. "This ain't over," Crawley roared, clutching his wounded arm. "That squaw belongs to us legal. We got papers." "Your papers ain't worth the pot they belong in." Cade shot back, working the bolt on his rifle. "And if I see you on my land again, you'll be going home in pine boxes." Another arrow whistled past Crawley's ear, close enough to part his greasy hair. He looked up to see Ayana already knocking another shaft, her face set in grim determination. "Come on, boys," he called to his men. "We'll be back with the law. Bring 'em." Cade yelled as the traders wheeled their horses around and rode hard for the horizon. "I got friends in town, too." The sound of hoofbeats faded into the distance, leaving only the wind and the nervous nickering of horses. Cade slowly lowered his rifle, adrenaline still coursing through his veins. When he turned around, Ayana was leaning against the stable door, her bow unstrung, her hands shaking slightly. "Thought I told you to hide," he said, though there was no anger in his voice, only concern. "Apache women don't hide," she replied, trying to keep her voice steady. "We fight beside our men." The words hung between them, loaded with meaning. Our men. She'd claimed him as surely as he'd claimed her, and they both knew it. Cade walked slowly toward her, his boots crunching on the gravel. When he reached her, he cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs brushing away tears she hadn't realized. "We're falling." "They'll be back," she whispered. "Let 'em come," he said fiercely. "Long as there's breath in my body, nobody's tacking you anywhere you don't want to go." That night, they didn't speak of Crawley's threats or the inevitable return of the traders. Instead, they sat by the fireplace, sharing stories and discovering the depths of their connection. Ayana told him about her childhood among the Apache, about learning to hunt and heal, about the grandmother who taught her that love was the strongest medicine of all. Cade spoke of his own past, the ranch he'd built from nothing, the loneliness that had settled in his bones like winter frost, the way she'd changed everything just by being there. "My grandmother had vision," Ayana said softly, her head resting against Cade's shoulder as they watched the flames dance. "She see white man in her dreams, man with eyes like storm clouds and hands like her grandfather's, gentle but strong. She say this man would be my destiny." Cade's arm tightened around her. "Smart woman, your grandmother. She also say the path to him would be painted with tears and blood." Ayana lifted her head to meet his gaze. "Maybe she knew about Crawley. Maybe she knew I would have to suffer before I could find joy." "Suffering's over now," Cade murmured, pressing a kiss to her temple. "I promise you that." "You cannot promise such things." Tomorrow ain't here yet," he interrupted, turning her face toward his. "Tonight, we're here, safe, together. That's all that matters." When he kissed her, it was with a tenderness that made her heart ache. This was nothing like the brutal pawing of the traders. This was worship, reverence, a claiming that honored rather than conquered. She melted against him, her hands fisting in his shirt as she kissed him back with all the passion she'd kept locked away. "Ayana," he breathed against her lips, "my beautiful wildcat." Cade. His name was a prayer on her tongue. "Make me forget. Make me remember only this." He carried her to his bed as if she were made of spun glass, laying her down with infinite care. In the lamplight, he traced every scar the traders had left on her skin, replacing each mark of violence with gentle kisses until she wept with relief. When they finally came together, it was with a passion that transcended flesh, two souls recognizing their other half and claiming it completely. Later, As they lay entwined in the moonlight, Cade made a decision that would change everything. "Marry me," he said suddenly, his voice rough with emotion. Ayanna stilled in his arms. "What did you say?" "You heard me." He pulled back to look at her, his gray eyes serious. "Marry me, Ayanna. Be my wife. Let me spend the rest of my life protecting you, loving you, building something beautiful with you." "Cade, we can do any damn thing we please," he said fiercely. "I don't care what the law says about your people and mine. I don't care what papers Crawley thinks he has. You belong to yourself, and if you choose to belong to me too, then by God, we'll make it legal and proper." Tears slipped down her cheeks. "The preacher in town. There's a circuit preacher comes through next month. Old man Henderson. He married couples during the war when there wasn't time for fancy ceremonies. He'll marry us if I ask him to. And your neighbors? Your friends?" Cade's jaw set stubbornly. "Anyone who can't accept my wife ain't worth knowing. This is Texas, not some Eastern drawing room. Out here, a man's character matters more than his pedigree." Ayanna studied his face, seeing only love and determination. There, no doubt, no shame, no calculation, just a man who'd found his other half and was willing to fight the world to keep her. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes? Yes, I will marry you, Cade Maverick. I will be your wife and bear your children and stand beside you until the spirits call me home." He kissed her then with desperate joy, and they made love again with the fierce passion of two people who knew they were racing against time. 2 weeks later, the Reverend Henderson arrived just as promised, a kind-faced man with twinkling eyes who asked no questions about the bride's heritage. Cade had spent the intervening days making preparations, ordering a simple gold band from the general store, cleaning the house until it sparkled, and practicing the words he wanted to say. Ayanna had crafted her own wedding dress from soft deerskin, decorated with intricate beadwork that told the story of their love in Apache symbols. The ceremony took place in Cade's front parlor at sunset, with Thunder and the other horses as their only witnesses besides the preacher. Ayanna had never looked more beautiful, her dark hair crowned with wildflowers, her eyes bright with joy and anticipation. "Do you, Cade Maverick, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife?" Reverend Henderson asked. "I do," Cade said firmly, slipping the gold ring onto Ayanna's finger. "With all my heart and soul." "And do you, Ayanna, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband?" "I do," she replied, her voice strong and clear. "In the eyes of your God and the spirits of my people. Then by the power vested in me, I pronounce you husband and wife. Cade, you may kiss your bride." Their kiss was soft and sweet, full of promise for the future they would build together. But even as they celebrated with a simple dinner and dancing, to Cade's harmonica, both knew their happiness was borrowed time. Crawley hadn't returned yet, but he would. Men like him didn't forget slights, and they certainly didn't forget valuable property that had slipped through their fingers. The attack came 3 days after the wedding, just before dawn. This time, Crawley brought 10 men instead of 5. And they came with fire. Cade and Ayanna woke to the smell of smoke and the sound of men surrounding their house. Through the window, they could see torches moving in the darkness, hear the harsh voices of the traitors as they prepared their assault. "Back door," Cade whispered, grabbing his rifle and ammunition. "We'll make for the stable, get Thunder, and ride hard for town." But when they crept to the back of the house, more men waited there. They were trapped. Maverick. Crawley's voice boomed across the yard. "You got 1 minute to send out our property, or we burn you out." "Go to hell," Cade shouted back. "Have it your way." The first torch hit the roof with a whoosh of flames. Within seconds, the dry wood was blazing, smoke beginning to fill the house. Cade kicked out the front window and began returning fire, but there were too many of them, and they had the advantage of cover. "Cade," Ayanna said urgently, "there is another way." "What way?" She pointed to the root cellar he tried to hide her in weeks ago. "It connects to old mine shaft. Goes under the stable. My people used such tunnels during the wars." Hope flared. "In Cade's chest, you sure? I explored while you were in town yesterday. The tunnel is narrow, but we can crawl through." Another torch hit the side of the house. The fire was spreading fast, and soon the whole structure would be an inferno. They had minutes at most. "Let's go," Cade said. They dropped into the root cellar just as the kitchen ceiling began to collapse above them. The tunnel Ayanna had discovered was indeed narrow, barely wide enough for a person to crawl through, but it was their only chance. "I go first," she insisted. "Apache, no darkness." They crawled through pitch blackness for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. The sound of crackling flames and shouting men growing fainter behind them. Finally, Ayanna's whispered, "Here," told Cade they'd reached the stable. They emerged to find Thunder and the other horses in a panic from the smoke and noise. Working quickly, they saddled the stallion and led him out the back of the stable, using the smoke as cover. "There they are," someone shouted. Bullets whined past their heads as they mounted Thunder double. Cade spurred the great horse forward, and they thundered into the night with half of Crawley's men in pursuit. The chase lasted until dawn, Thunder's powerful legs carrying them across prairie and through canyons while bullets whistled overhead. They finally lost their pursuers in a maze of rocky outcroppings that only Ayanna knew how to navigate. When they finally stopped to rest beside a hidden spring, both horse and riders were exhausted. "It's over," Cade said heavily, watching smoke rise in the distance where his ranch had been. "Everything I built, everything I worked for gone." "No," Ayanna said firmly, taking his face in her hands. "A building is not a home. Animals can be replaced. The land will still be there when the ashes cool. We will rebuild stronger than before. They'll never leave us alone." "Crawley won't stop until Crawley is finished," she interrupted, her voice cold as winter wind. "What do you mean?" She pointed toward the smoke on the horizon. "My people saw the fire. They know what it means when a good man's home burns. Apache. Justice is swift and final for those who trade in human flesh." Even as she spoke, they could hear the distant sound of war cries carried on the morning wind. Cade felt a chill run down his spine as he realized what was happening. "Your tribe. My uncle is war chief. When I disappeared, he sent scouts to find me. They have been watching from the hills, waiting to see if I was safe or needed rescue." Her smile was fierce and proud. "Apache take care of their own, and you are one of us now." By the time they rode back to the ranch that evening, it was over. Crawley and his men had been dealt with in the traditional Apache manner, swift, decisive, and permanent. The house was indeed gone, but the barn had been saved, and several of Cade's neighbors had already arrived to help with the cleanup. Heard about the trouble, old Doc Wilson said, tipping his hat to Ayanna with genuine respect. "Shame about the house, but we'll have you a new one up before winter. Can't have our best horse breeder and his wife living in a barn." To Cade's amazement, the acceptance was nearly universal. Word had spread about how Ayanna had fought beside him, how she'd helped him escape the fire, how her people had ultimately ended the threat that had plagued the territory for months. In the harsh landscape of Texas, courage and loyalty mattered. More than skin color. They rebuilt the house bigger and better than before, with Apache techniques for staying cool in summer and warm in winter. Ayanna's uncle, Chief Manolito, came for the house raising, bringing gifts of horses and offering his niece's new husband a place of honor in the tribe. "You have Apache heart," the old chief told Cade in carefully practiced English. "You protect what is yours. This is good." 6 months later, As Ayanna placed Cade's hand on her growing belly and told him about the child they had created, he marveled at how completely his life had changed. What had started as a chance encounter in his stable had become the greatest adventure of his life. Boy or girl? He asked, pressing a kiss to her temple. Does it matter? She replied, leaning back against his chest as they watched the sunset paint their land in shades of gold and crimson. Not one bit, he said, his arms tightening around his wife and unborn child. Long as it's ours. Thunder nickered softly from his stall, as if agreeing with his master's sentiments. In the distance, the evening star appeared in the darkening. Sky, the same star Ayanna's grandmother had told her would guide her to her destiny. The wild Apache woman and the lone cowboy had found their happily ever after, forged in fire and sealed with love that could weather any storm. Their children would grow up knowing both worlds, strong in the ways of both their peoples, and the legend of their love would be told around campfires for generations to come. Some stories, Cade reflected as he held his family close, were worth all the pain it took to reach the happy ending.